Do you like good movies or bad movies, Alex?
I love bad movies. I'll admit it.
Ugh. All right, so today's topic is movies that shaped our guilty pleasures. Hey, I'm Karan from San Francisco.
And this is Alex from Los Angeles, and welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We are both two longtime friends who grew up on opposite sides of the globe with very different backgrounds. We're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite movies. So, Karan, why don't we get a little bit more into what we're talking about today? Guilty pleasures. This is a really fun episode for me, but why don't you talk through kind of what guilty pleasures mean to you? And let's
Yeah.
talk about it.
Well, in a movie context, I mean, I think listeners probably know this, that I'm not a big sort of proponent of, oh, this is so bad, it's so good. Like, I can watch it one time, but, it's not something that I'm going to watch over and over again. So for me, guilty pleasures and the way I thought about this list was
Hmm.
essentially movies that have been mostly, treated by the culture as these are not good, but I like them. And so, you're going to get, I mean, I'm very aware of why they're not great or perfect, and that's not the point.
Hmm.
But I do find defendable things in each of them, and they give me, pleasure and joy in some way or the other. But I wouldn't call them, I wouldn't categorize them as, oh, these are so bad that I laugh at them and that
Hmm.
gives me pleasure or happiness. Like, that is never the case. I never want to laugh at anybody's work. Maybe one time, and that's sort of it. Yeah. What about you? How did you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the same in the sense of I know the movie's objectively bad. The culture said it's bad, badly reviewed. Maybe it also bombed at the box office, always maligned. And I won't defend it as a movie. Like I
Mm,
admit, yeah, this is a bad movie, but I still get tons of enjoyment out of it for various reasons. The three
mm,
movies that I'm bringing to the table today, I like for different reasons, but definitely will not. If someone said, "Oh, this movie's bad," I'm not going to argue with them. And it was
mm.
actually a little bit difficult because there are some movies that are maligned, like Showgirls, or we did last week Phantom Menace or Mission Impossible 2, that I actually will defend as great movies.
Right.
So I had to remove those from consideration here because these are movies where, yeah, if it was again, I'm not saying these are good in any way. They fail on many different levels, but some reason for me personally, I get a lot of enjoyment and pleasure out of them. And yeah, I'm guilty as charged. I enjoy these films, but it's I think this is interesting. This will be very interesting too because maybe not since our episode on sense of humor have we covered a topic that has been so like subjective. I think
Right.
everyone has a different form of what a guilty pleasure is, and someone's guilty pleasure movie might be someone else's absolute torture, which I guess is kind of the point.
Which
So
is the point. Yeah.
it's I wish it kind of interesting and fun watching these movies too to be like, oh yeah, I kind of get a sense of your personality. And I know, obviously I know who you are, but these felt
Yeah.
like Quran guilty pleasure movies to me, which was fun to be like, oh yeah, no, I get why this is something that Quran enjoys. And that helped me not that I will defend any of your movies either in terms of being good, but I was like, oh, I kind of get why it felt like I was watching it with you, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
No, same. Yeah, I think that's very well put. I, on the other hand, will defend my movies in various aspects, as I said. So even though
Oh,
I
you
know
will
that
as
oh yeah,
movies. Oh,
oh
okay. Well,
yeah,
then this is going
I
to be a
do.
very heated discussion.
I do defend them because there are things that I like about them. Because, like I said, like, I don't think I can watch anything that I just thought was bad.
Oh,
I
sure, sure,
watch it
sure.
because I like it, there are
Right,
aspects of it,
right, right.
even though I agree that the broader culture might think it's not good, but I can defend these movies, not to defend them as great movies,
Hmm.
but defend them as good. So yeah,
Okay,
a
okay.
little bit different from what you're saying, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I am not defending my
'Cause-
films
yeah,
as
because
good
I
works
don't
of
have
works of art.
such any such movies, or
Yeah.
maybe I saw them once and now they're off my mind. I don't remember any such movies that you have on your list.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, so with that, do you want to start with your number three guilty pleasure movie, Alex?
Sure. I'll embarrass myself first here. So my number three movie that shaped my feeling of guilty pleasures is Crossroads from 2002. This is a film
Mm.
directed by Tamara Davis, written by Shonda Rhimes, and starring Britney Spears, Zoe Saldana, Taryn Manning, Anson Mount, and Dan Aykroyd. The IMDb plot summary: three childhood best friends and a guy they just met take a road trip across the country, finding themselves and their friendships in the process. Yeah, like I said at the outset, this movie is not a good movie. It is bad. But this is an example to me of a movie that, because I love the star so much, I'm a huge Britney Spears fan. I've been since I was in high school when she first broke onto the scene. I get enjoyment out of this movie because of my love for Britney, her personality, her vibe. And I feel this movie actually is very personal to her in terms of what she stands for as an artist. So I saw this movie in the theater when it first came out opening weekend because I was a big Britney fan. And the movie was a notorious, like critically maligned film. She was mocked severely for this. It actually did kind of decent at the box office. She never made a movie again, at least not as a starring vehicle. But I still watch this movie and it brings me joy. And had you seen this film before? And what is your Britney Spears take, I guess, too? Because that's kind of important to this film, I feel like.
Oh yeah. No, I had not seen the movie, but I think the news of how bad it was and such definitely reached my ears, and probably why I didn't watch it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm a huge Britney fan as well.
Oh, nice.
My boyfriend is the biggest Britney fan of all time, probably. So
Oh,
Britney is sort of in my life and in my
yeah.
consciousness, and pretty much on a consistent basis. But yeah, it was fun to watch this for the first time.
Oh.
I'm very curious to hear why and how this brings you joy. But I will actually defend this movie in the
Oh, really?
way
Okay.
I will defend my movies, which is that I think there's to me, like a tone thing, because this movie is marketed, at least how I took it, as like, oh, it'll be like a fun,
Right.
teenage movie, kind of slapstick and propulsive and silly at times, and
Mm-hmm.
a good time essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Versus this movie actually is a lot more contemplative. It actually
Yes.
feels like, a movie that one of our celebrated male directors would have made about a road trip, about three or four guys who
Mm-hmm.
are at the brink of adulthood or are exploring deeper things. It has that kind of a tone to it. So I think
Mm-hmm.
uh, those two things. Yeah, this movie doesn't add up very well because the tone is different from what you expect it to be. But I actually quite liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, there's an energy problem. I think maybe that's the direction she was given, that, oh, you are in a contemplative sort of serious movie. So
Mm-hmm.
her energy is at like a 2 or a 1.5 versus everybody else is on like a 10, I
Mm.
think. So that also felt a little bit like, when people are saying, who, Brittany's like, who?
Mm.
There's like literal moments like that in the movie. But overall, I don't know. I thought this movie was actually quite good. Or maybe I just went in with such low expectations that I was like, oh, this is actually not so bad. Why is this movie so maligned?
Yeah, it is interesting, and one of the reasons why, like I said, I have always liked Britney, and I think a lot of hers in this film, and that it is not what you would expect. Like you would
Hmm.
expect something like Mariah Carey's Glitter or Spice
Hmm.
World, from the Spice Girls, where it's
Right.
more of a pop film because they were pop artists, and this definitely is a teen melodrama road trip with
Yeah.
some very crazy. I mean, Shonda Rhimes, who went on to later success with Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, and Bridgerton, like very successful writer now. She's also very soapy though. Like Shonda Rhimes'
Hmm.
signature is like very over the top, soap
Right.
opera kind of plot lines. And this movie is very melodramatic, very soapy, especially towards the end.
Oh, yeah.
When, yeah, like Britney's plot line is very predictable. You kind of know where it's going. It's kind of
Right.
cheesy like that. But stuff else that happens around miscarriages and surprise pregnancies and rape and all these things that kind of come out of nowhere in the last 10 minutes are very kind of Shonda Rhimesy
Yeah.
and cheeseball, because it is so over the top and melodramatic. But to me, actually, that's what makes this film kind of interesting and feel like Britney. And actually, Britney, when they were making this movie, sat down with Shonda Rhimes and said, "Look, I want these sort of things in the movie. I want a girl who feels, expectations of her parents are, not
Yeah.
what
There's
she wants
some
to
very
do. A
real
broken
themes of her
childhood,
life.
right? I
Yeah.
want teen pregnancy. And then Shonda went on and did her Shonda thing and wrote all those things in there. But because Britney put her own personal kind of take in it, and I don't really know the history behind Glitter and Spice World, so maybe that's what Mariah kind of wanted to make. But I think this feels like Britney to me. And
Hmm.
because I was such a big fan of hers at the time, and a lot of it was about this, as I was a teenager too, and struggling with am I an adult? Am I a child? I want to be treated as both, which is a
Yeah.
theme of this film. And, she obviously writes one of her hits. I'm not a girl, not yet a woman, but that is a theme that is carried through
Yeah.
in her music, and it's also a theme in this film, which is what I like about it because it feels authentic Britney to me, and I think Britney's authenticity is something I've always respected about her.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and that's the tone thing, right? You have all these cheesy melodramatic things, but
Mm-hmm.
the movie is made with a sense of seriousness, and I think that's why there's a bit of a mismatch. But I don't know, I still enjoyed it. Like it's a very different kind of teen movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were talking earlier, like most teen movies are kind of poppy and kind of silly. This is not that actually. Um, I also think the movie is maligned because, you know, it's a pop star and you kind of people in the culture enjoys sort of hating on a new thing that they do, especially in that era when this movie was made. I think maybe if this movie of this kind of a movie is made now, say if Taylor Swift made a movie now, it wouldn't of this kind of in
Mm-hmm.
this milieu, it would be respected probably because I think we've evolved as a culture. But I can sort of imagine like people just hating on it. Oh, she can't act. She's doing this, and this is neither there nor there. What a disaster! But
Yeah,
actually, it's not.
definitely. No, for sure. And it was actually interesting in rewatching this. I've watched it every couple years, but on this rewatch, especially just going back to that time in like 2000, 2001, 2002,
Culture was
where, there's
vicious.
a scene in the film where the girls are on a road trip and they get in this guy's car and it's his car and he's kind of driving them there and they want to turn on the radio and switch it over to NSYNC or it was NSYNC
Mm,
and sing an NSYNC song. And he has to be like, oh, I hate NSYNC and I hate all these
right.
boy bands because he's the guy. And that was the case back then. Like, if you were a
Yeah.
guy, you couldn't like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys. You could only like Britney because she was, a hot teenage girl. And
Right.
but not you had to hate her music, but you had to like, her. You had to
Right.
find her attractive. It was very like vicious. The
Yeah.
back and forth. Then I mean, you would get probably beat up on the schoolyard if you said you liked the Backstreet Boys and you were a guy. And that
Oh wow.
I don't think is at all the case now. I think you're right. If
Right.
Taylor Swift made him, and there's tons of guys who love Taylor Swift. I
Yeah.
love Taylor Swift. She's great for her music
Hmm.
and what she stands for and all those sort of things.
Hmm.
And I think, and again, I'm not a high school student, but I would figure,
Thank God.
it's probably acceptable to be a guy and to be in Taylor Swift now, where
Yeah.
back in the late 90s, you could not like a boy band or even a female pop star. So it was interesting seeing that dynamic in this film, even when they're calling that out and there's they're trying to play it for laughs when
Yeah.
he's saying, oh, I hate how can you listen to NSYNC? This is so terrible.
Yeah.
And actually, we haven't really talked about the bad things in this movie much, but I want to point some of those out to explain a little bit more why I do feel guilty listening to this. There's also one of the dumbest scenes I've ever seen in a movie where he falls asleep in the back seat, and then the women kind of take over and keep driving, and they're singing along to Shania Twain or something, and he wakes up and just has a panic attack and like jumps out of the car and like is kicking the sand and be like, I'm just like a guy, man. Like I'm a guy, and I'm a guy, and literally I'm like actually quoting the movie, and it's the weirdest scene where he just
So
freaks out because
yeah.
there's too much women around him or something. It's so stupid. It's so dumb, but it's also kind of funny at the same time. Like I do sort of laugh at dumb things, and that scene is so weird
But
and
it's
totally
also,
out of place.
like you said earlier, representative of the
It
time,
it
and the
was no,
culture. Like I
it
think
definitely was.
maybe there were people who would feel that way,
I know
So
it's just so weird.
yeah.
Even back then, I remember seeing it sitting in the theater, be like, "It's kind of a bizarre scene. Like, why is this even?" But you're right. I mean, it is definitely reflective on the culture. But well, just to mention a couple things, so we're not being too, because listeners might think we're being too easy on this movie of like, why is it so terrible? We seem to be both singing his praise a little much. So I'll just kind of throw in there are some issues just in terms of the production. There's a scene that I didn't actually pick up till this time I saw it, where Zoe Saldana, they're talking in like in a hotel room, and she's brushing her teeth with like a completely dry toothbrush, and it's like so obvious, like this is just not at all how you should, be brushing your teeth in the scene. I'm like, okay, they definitely need another take for that one. And then to kind of pick up on a comment that you made just about Britney's performance, there's sort of a centerpiece of the film halfway through where they go to a karaoke bar and they sing a cover of Joan Jett's "I Love Rock and Roll," and it's
Hmm.
like the flattest performance.
Oh
Like
yeah.
she's a pop star, globally known pop star. This is supposed to be the big moment where everyone's like, "Oh wow, you guys are great. Here's all this money. Go on, get the gas you need or what have you." And it's like the flattest performance, shot really boring.
It's not good.
It's like what's going on here? Like this is it's so odd. But again, like I let those things slide in the older
Right.
melodramatic and the that thing because I mean maybe it also just my bias for, as we mentioned in previous episodes too, just female friendship movies, which is one of those types of films like I'm always a sucker for. But again, I am guilty as charged for liking Crossroads even at the time.
Yeah.
I was in that open theater opening weekend. But I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
And
I thought this
you
was
know,
pretty good actually. Yeah. I mean, the other cheesy thing I would add is towards the end when the guy has like the entire music written out for a song. I was like,
oh
oh, you've got something going on over there.
yeah, no,
He
that's
just shows
true.
up. The whole thing is figured out.
Yeah, he's like, oh, here's this whole thing. Oh, I guess
Yeah.
also I should add, there's a lot of, moments of male gaze in this movie where clearly the camera's
Oh
like,
yeah.
Brittany dances in her underwear twice for no reason.
Oh
The
yeah.
camera's like focusing in on her midriff was like, midriffs are a big thing in
Yeah,
the
that
turn of the
whole
century.
outfit in the performance, I'm like, why are we wearing this?
Yeah, hey, it was 2002. That's what we used to do back then, which
Hmm.
which is also kind of fun now going back and seeing all the low-rise jeans and the really funny like
True.
Matrix inspired sunglasses and all these things that are clearly, 2000 aesthetic, but good. Well, glad you enjoyed it. So, let's move on to your number 3 movie that shaped your guilty pleasure. What do we got, Karan?
I'm gonna get in hot water for this one probably,
Uh-oh.
but it's Bringing Down the House from 2003, starring Queen Latifah, Steve Martin, Eugene Levy, directed by Adam Shankman. Quick logline: when a lonely guy meets a woman on the internet who happens to be in prison, she breaks out to get him to prove her innocence and proceeds to work havoc on his middle class life. I guess that's pretty accurate.
That is the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is basically the movie.
So this is on my list because I think you and I, we lived through this era of like raunchy, kind of inappropriate comedies from the 90s and 2000s, and
Yep.
this is that. And I
Yep.
think movies like this don't exist anymore at all.
Hmm.
And it's still, there are moments in this movie that are very cringeworthy and hard to watch. But I don't know. I want to believe that the people who made this movie and are in it are kind of in on it. And in some ways, if you look at it in a very objective way, this movie would be totally canceled right now, wouldn't be made.
Right,
But
right, right.
but I think if you zoom out and sort of really approach it from that, yeah, people are in on it, and there is comedy, if you will, just as it is comedy in death and some of the
Hmm.
horrible things that we as humans go through. There is comedy in racial classes and the stereotypicalness of things, even though it's heightened to, a 2 million.
Hmm.
There's comedy in that. So I think that's why I love it. And the fact these two are incredible, and the supporting cast with, I didn't mention Joan Plowright, who,
Oh, right. Yeah.
yeah, that song on the table. And yeah. Anyway, but had you watched this movie before?
No, I had not. I had not
Oh.
seen it. Yeah, yeah. I like Steve Martin, like we mentioned in
Mhm.
previous episodes, though it was after his late 90s career. After that, I kind of stopped following his career very closely. And as we've talked about in the a previous episode where we covered The Last Holiday with Queen Latifah, I'm not at all any fan of hers. She never works for me. So that's why I hadn't
Yeah.
seen this before. And yeah, this movie was pretty shocking, to be honest, that this was made, and especially so recently. I mean, it's not like made in like 1942, that it was so casually racist. Like the entire plot hinges on
Hmm.
basically, oh my God, there's a black woman in my house,
Hmm.
and then oh my God, we have to hide the black woman, hide the black woman, hide the black woman is sort of where
Hmm.
the comedy comes from. And yeah, maybe if it was a different star that I found was more funny, the comedy would kind of work for me more in terms of the Queen Latifah side. But it definitely was a cultural a time capsule. In the same way we were just talking
Yeah.
about with Crossroads with the clothes, this was more about like, oh yeah, like we could have a movie that basically centered on like, oh no, he's with potentially like dating a black woman. How horrible is this? And his ex-wife is like freaking out because he might just be with just a black woman. I mean, it wasn't like
Right.
they knew she was a criminal, right? That wasn't, it was like, oh no, he's dating ex-con. It's like, oh my God, he's dating a black woman. This is so scandalous. And, but to your point though, wasn't mean spirited. It wasn't like they were, the movie was like purposefully racist or anything.
No.
There was just a casualness to the racism because I guess it was again a product of its time. It was a huge hit too, a giant hit, huge
Huge
hit at
hit.
the time. But
And
yeah, it was. I was a little like shocked actually how
it is
much they
shocking.
kept going with this.
Oh,
It wasn't
yeah.
just like one joke. The entire premise is
The
a
whole thing
black
is
woman
that.
comes into a suburb of a bunch of white people. What's going on? Why is there a black woman here? Is basically
Yeah.
the movie.
No, it's definitely shocking. And
Yeah.
I had not seen it in a while, and watching it, now I was like, oh, this is like a lot. But I think that's the thing with comedy, right? That I
Hmm.
think there intentionally or unintentionally, there is some truth always.
Hmm.
And I think there is some truth here that in that time, maybe even today, in a neighborhood that looked like that, probably people wouldn't be saying all this, so out loud in this exact fashion, but
Hmm.
probably they would be thinking it at the very least.
True.
And so I
That's
think
true.
that's the thing. Like, I think there is something true about this, and it's obviously ratcheted up to a 2 million, like I said, and they've kind of turned it on its head and made it into a comedy. But there is something subversive about it and and it's a very careful tone, I think, because you're right. Like this movie, one step in the other direction, at least to me, becomes a racist movie
Right, right,
that
right.
is totally unwatchable and is just wrong. And to each their own. I'm sure many people might feel that this is wrong
Yeah.
too, and I
I
would
I kind of
not.
I kind of do, to be honest
I
with you.
I
I mean, I
it's
excuse it
there.
for I'm not at the time called movie at the time, but I do feel yeah, this movie
Yeah.
was like holy crap. Like
It
it's
is
crazy.
definitely
Yeah.
heading there, and I would not contest that at all for
Mhm.
sure. But yeah, I think intentionally or unintentionally, it does end up showing the truth in some
Mhm.
way,
Yeah,
and makes kind of a joke about it. Now, one could
true.
argue, should one be making a joke about it or not?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing to me when I was watching this, because there was actually a scene in the film where Steve Martin comes home and Queen Latifah, who's again is his ex-con, who's basically tricked him into trying to help him be her lawyer, basically get out of jail, where she brings over a bunch of her black friends,
Mm,
and there's a bunch of very very stereotypical slash racist sort of like black behavior of like, oh, they're all drinking, they're playing dice, and the kids are there sort of getting like corrupted, essentially is what the movie's saying, by the people in the crowd. And I was watching this being like, yeah, this is really uncomfortable as I'm watching this. But I was thinking, well, there was that scene in a movie we covered last year in our episode about money trading places. That is
hmm
basically the same scene where Eddie Murphy
hmm
comes back to his mansion, and now there's all of his old friends. Because the plot of that film is he's a homeless person, and these millionaires basically, for various reasons in that plot, give him a bunch of money. So now he lives in this mansion, and all of
hmm
his old sort of poor friends come over, and they're also doing a lot of the same things that were happening in this scene. Like they were drinking, they were
hmm
gambling, and there's prostitutes and everything and like that there. And I was like, why does that not bother me? But this does. And I was thinking, well, that sort of, at least the movies about class and race, and that's what Trading Places is about. Whereas this movie, I didn't think had that necessarily as a theme, or at least I didn't see that as what the message of this movie was. So I don't know. To me, like that's why the one scene, which is basically the same scene, is funny, even though you could say it's definitely racist. The scene in Trading Places, for sure, it's all black stereotypes, and you were laughing because of there's those stereotypes there, but there's a point to it because that's the thesis of the film connects back to that. And for at least this movie, I'm like, okay, they're just doing this to get some cheap laughs, even though they're the same things. I mean, they're the same level of, if you want to call it racism or what have stereotypes, playing around with stereotypes. But because there's not a thesis to the film or anything behind it, just maybe that's why it kind of just rubbed me differently. I also, to be honest, there was only one scene in the movie that I laughed at. There was a really funny part where he's talking, Steve Martin's talking to Queen Latifah, and or I can't remember actually who's talking to, and it's like, oh, they're trying to do like a sexy talk on the phone. And he's like, oh yeah, kiss me a bunch of times, and like that's as much as he can do, and that was actually like I laughed at that. And the Eugene Levy stuff was funny, even though again kind of bordered on a little bit uncomfortable too. But yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah.
didn't really find the movie that funny, and maybe it's because I'm not into Queen Latifah so much. So it was only Steve Martin trying to kind of carry it for me. But yeah, I just thought it was
Yeah.
interesting juxtaposed between those two movies. It just kind of came into my head. I don't know if that you remembered in that scene in Training
I didn't
Places.
remember, but now that you bring it up, yeah, it totally is. And I don't know, maybe it's the deftness of how it's handled tonally and or how it's put together.
Yeah.
I mean, I find a lot of moments in Trading Places also quite uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
They use the N word in that movie.
definitely, and there's blackface and all sorts
Oh
of
yeah.
things in that movie, but this is a tricky one. There's no
But I mean, look,
question about that.
if the theme of this is guilty pleasure. So again, like I'm
Mhm.
not trying to say, the point of it is the movie you can't necessarily defend as a film. You just like it for some particular reason, which I think I read on this is you love Queen Latifah and you love Steve Martin, both in the same movie. And again, it was a huge hit at the time, box office wise. Reviews not so much at all, but box office wise, it
Box
was.
office
So
was
I can definitely
definitely,
see this
yeah,
fits totally into that category for
definitely
sure.
fits in that category. And I will say that, I watched it a few years ago and I had a very similar reaction as yours. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like horrible. I can't even watch it. And then for some reason, I watched it recently,
Hmm.
like 6 months or so, about once we kind of, came up with the idea of this episode, because I was thinking about it. And then I watched it and I don't know, I sort of approached this movie a little bit differently,
Hmm.
sort of saying that, okay, everybody's in on the joke.
Which
This
is
is the
true. Yes.
heightened thing.
Hmm.
And in doing so, they're kind of uncovering a certain truth behind this, even though it's very uncomfortable and in many, many cases just wrong.
Hmm.
It sort of made I kind of went along for that ride. So when you have to kind of make that switch
Yeah. Right.
in your head to then go with it, and then it does become funny.
But I think that's where the guilty pleasure part of it comes into it. Like some
Mhm.
people, if they're not doing that, then they don't. Maybe again, I didn't
Yeah,
really
and
find
I
the movie
myself can
funny.
do it on
Like
one
putting
time.
the racial stuff aside, I actually didn't really find it that funny. So it wasn't. It was kind of both of those things. I didn't think it was good, but it's a guilty pleasure. Like it's. I understood why this is something that because again you do love the stars so much.
Mhm.
Another thing I thought was very actually funny, but not like in the movie, but I found funny as I was watching it was just how dated some of the things were. There was like a Ozzy Osbourne reference because there was a
Oh
Ozzy
my
Osbourne like
gosh.
reality show, a Tybo joke, which I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. And a funny joke was this whole thing about like, oh my God, that guy spent $600 on a cell phone. Like he's crazy. And now it's like, oh yeah, like we buy $1,200 cell phones.
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, just wait like 10 years and you'll see when the iPhone comes out and like $600 would be a freaking deal. Like that's a cheap phone now. Even with
Right.
inflation, I think that joke for some reason was really funny to me. Or maybe just comment. I don't think it was necessarily even a joke meant to be a joke so much. And I was like, oh wow, yeah, what an innocent time we were back then where that was a lot of money on a cell phone.
Uh, all right. What is your next movie?
Well, my number two movie that shaped my feelings of guilty pleasure is also a stupid comedy. It's Basketball from 1998.
Mm.
This is a film written and directed by David Zucker, starring Trey Parker and Matt Stone, Dean Bakar and Yasmin Bleeth. The plot summary: two childhood friends are pro athletes of a national sport called basketball, a hybrid of baseball and basketball, and must deal with a greedy businessman scheming against their team. So for this one, for me, I have, like we mentioned in the comedy episode we did on a sense of humor, that
Mhm.
humor is very subjective. And I like a lot of really stupid comedies that were not well reviewed, were box office bombs, but I really love them. So I wanted to pick one that exemplify that entire category. And I'll list more of those movies when we get to the end of the episode.
Mhm.
But this was a movie that was a huge box office bomb at the time. I saw it on VHS. I didn't see it in the theaters and immediately was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And watch it. Actually, this year I've seen it 3 times
Oh
already
my gosh.
before I watched it for this podcast. Like I just put this on when I'm in kind of like a bad mood or just need to laugh. It is definitely very pleasurable for me, but I'm not at all going to say this is some form of high art comedy. Not even in the way that a stupid comedy can be groundbreaking. I mean, Zucker's Airplane movie, that was a groundbreaking comedy when it came out, and it is dumb humor, but that is, held up as a historic film. And this one is it's definitely not held up as anything. But I absolutely love it. Before I talk more about the movie, had you seen this before, heard of this before, and what was your take on basketball?
I'd heard of it, hadn't seen it, and it sort of falls in that, genre of kind of stupid idiot comedies,
Yes, it
and there's so
does.
many of these from that time.
Hmm.
But yeah, the moment as I put it on, I was like, yeah, I know exactly why Alex likes this.
It's so
And
dumb.
it's just so dumb. And I mean, I just sat there with a straight face
Yeah.
for the most part and didn't have a single laugh to it. That said, there is something time capsule about a movie like this. Like it's
Hmm.
very much from our growing up. This is the kind of stuff that I don't want to say people did, but this is sort of what was on TV. This is sort
Right.
of
Right.
how humor was, and maybe a version of that was in our lives too, just how people were.
Hmm.
And so there's something, I don't know, charming about that. Like this movie was not like, oh my gosh, I can't even watch this. Like I'm so
Right. Right.
repelled by it. No, it's
Hmm.
not that. It's sort of adorable in that time capsule
And how
way, I
dumb.
think.
Yeah.
But it's not funny to me for sure.
Yeah, this, it could have been also, this came out in 98, so I was finishing up high school, going into college,
Right.
and that type of humor, I mean, not to be too stereotypical, but definitely, teenage boys like dumb
Right.
stuff. That's part of what it was like being a teenage boy. So
Yeah.
I liked dumb stuff, and this was definitely very, very dumb stuff. I mean, a lot of the classic David Zucker sight gags, where there's a lot of physical comedy, jokes happening in the background, like as he does in his films. And also, too, I should mention, the two leads, like I said, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, in case listeners don't know, are the creators of South Park, which is a show
Mhm.
I was obsessed with in high school. And they had done a couple acting performances in student films, and they had a couple independent movies before they hit it big with South Park that I also absolutely love and I'm obsessed with. But this was their first attempt at being in front of the camera. I mean, they didn't write the movie. It was
Mhm.
written by Zucker, but they performed in it. And then the movie was such a flop, they never did it again. And they also are obsessed with doing South Park. It takes up a lot of time. But
Mhm.
for me, too, like I also have a soft spot, much like the Britney Spears movie Crossroads that I mentioned, where I love Britney. So therefore, I, give the movie a little bit of slack. I also really love Matt and Trey and their personalities and the kind of art that they put out in the world, too. So just seeing them as the leads in this film, and they have such great chemistry together, I feel,
That's for
because they're
sure.
best friends from college. And I just love what I think their humor is matches a lot with my humor, and it just that stuff really works for me too, and just endlessly quotable lines to me, which is something that also is important in a comedy. One of my favorite lines that I quote all the time is a riff of the line from Scarface where they're talking about what they need to do to get ahead, and in the beginning of the movie, like, well, first we got to get the jobs, then we get the khakis, then we get the chicks, where they're talking about how to get the women as a playoff of Scarface. I quote that still to this day. But I find them really funny, and it works for me. But also, like, okay, there's the one thing I'll defend is like this is actually kind of good, even if you think the movie is stupid or don't like this type of humor. The very, very beginning, because a lot of the themes of this movie is how business, capitalism, etc., has been
Right.
ruining sports. And there's an opening montage just talking about sort of the
Yeah, yeah,
commercialization of
yeah.
sports that you probably find it on YouTube. It's like a minute and 30 seconds. That actually is pretty smart, I will say.
Yeah.
And it lays out the thesis of the movie, and then the movie turns into a really stupid, very broad comedy. But
Yeah.
that part is like, okay, like I get why what Zucker was doing here. But I still find the whole film funny. There's a scene in a hospital where it's just total slapstick, where this kid
Uh,
is dying and they're like stepping on the cables and they're trying to give him CPR and use the paddle, like, go get those paddles that George Clooney uses, and they're like just shocking him and stuff. And it's just, I don't know, I find that it's stupid. I'm not I'm not going to defend it, but I find it so funny. I mean, again, I will watch this so often. Actually, I will say too, there one scene as well. There's a montage really quickly of this camera footage, like where they tape over some game that he was, famous
mhm.
baseball game, and it's roadkill caught on tape, and it's like a camera footage of just animals getting hit by cars. Like obviously they're fake. That I remember for the first time seeing that, and I was literally crying. I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so hard at that. I was
Oh
on the
my
ground. I
gosh.
couldn't breathe. I had to like pause the movie because it was like one of the funniest things I've ever seen in any movie. But again, incredibly stupid, which is why to me it's just an encapsulation of guilty pleasure
Yeah,
for this
I
film.
will I will give you that on it for sure. And also, on the nostalgia thing that I was saying, like this captures, not that I missed that, but like
Hmm.
basically, loser boy or
Yes.
man-child
Hmm.
genre movies. There's so many of those in the 90s and even 2000s. I'm happy to have moved on from that
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
era of movies, but yeah, that's what I kept thinking of when I was watching this movie. It's like, oh my gosh, there's like so many of these sort of movies back then.
Interesting. Actually, I would argue, and I have to think about this a little bit more because I like what you're proposing here. This actually was a little early on in that.
Because
Definitely
they
the
just
Judd
started it.
Apatow age of like in the 2000s and like Will Ferrell's characters. That the man-child thing I feel like is a little bit later than this, and I wonder if this maybe started that or helped. Maybe I'm selling the movie or not
Ugh,
selling it short, selling it long, or whatever the opposite of selling it short is. Yeah, I'm wondering maybe this movie was more groundbreaking than I thought in a way
oh
of
my
like
gosh, this
ushering
is
ushering
working in
that in.
opposite
I
ways
know,
than
I'm
I
sorry.
intend.
No, I will say too, just as a side note to the film is actually based on a true story in the sense of the director actually did with his friends create this game as kids, and then they
Oh.
adapted it into a movie. I mean, obviously the rest of it is obviously fake, the plot lines, but the premise of them creating this in their backyard, and then it was sort of a popular sport amongst the neighborhood where they were growing up, and
Mm.
actually got to meet the director once. And again, he's done Airplane and all these other like major hits. Top Secret, one of my favorite movies. But I
Mm.
specifically was like, look, I just want to tell you, and probably no one does. Baseball is like one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. I just want to thank you for that. And he's like, oh, he seems sort of like touched in a way because I think the movie kind of means a little bit to him because it came from his personal experience.
Right.
But he definitely was like very surprised. He's like, really? Basketball? Like that's the one? I'm like, yes. I just want to tell you, like I almost wore out that DVD in college watching this with my roommates.
Such a
So
kiss ass you are.
I
My
am, yeah, but
gosh.
it's the truth. I love I love basketball, and I'm not ashamed. Well, actually, no, I do feel guilty about it. I should say that because that's the point of this episode.
No,
But
yeah, we do. We should. Exactly.
yeah. Okay, what is your number two?
Okay. I'm taking a hard left. So my number two is The Iron Lady from 2011, starring the one and only Meryl Streep, Jim Broadbent, Richard E. Grant, Olivia Colman in an earlier film role, directed
Hmm.
by Philip Lloyd. Quick logline: an elderly Margaret Thatcher talks to the imagined presence of her recently deceased husband as she struggles to come to terms with his death, while scenes from her past life, from girlhood to British Prime Minister, intervene. That's really what the movie is. And
Yep.
yeah, this movie was, not reviewed very well, even though Meryl has a third Oscar for this movie,
Hmm.
but was broadly considered kind of stodgy and boring. And Margaret Thatcher is obviously a controversial figure.
Yeah, she's terrible.
And yeah, and so this movie got a lot of bad rep for painting her character in a more sympathetic way as well. But I have this movie on my list because I love Meryl, obviously. And
Hmm.
then B, one of my guilty pleasures is kind of a scenery chewing acting performance. Like
Mm.
it sort of tickles a very different pleasure bone, if you will,
Uh-huh.
in my mind, where if I'm kind of bored or what have you, if I really get energized by watching an actor who I really like kind of really dive into something. And and even though it's scenery chewing and some might be, repelled by it, I love it. So this is why this movie is on my list. But had you watched this movie before?
No, I'd never seen it. I just have a personal revulsion to the existence of Margaret Thatcher, so I avoided it at the time. Though I was tempted to see it because she did win the Oscar for it, and
Hmm.
I do also love Meryl Streep. And little teaser, we're teasing another episode we have coming up soon
Hmm.
where we'll get into more of that at the end about Meryl. But yeah, like it was. I found it interesting. It definitely was a very bad film, but I think her performance actually was good.
Oh yeah.
I'm not that this is surprising. Meryl does a good
No.
performance, but it made the movie interesting enough to get through. I wasn't bored in it, even though I thought the filmmaking and the writing and really everything around her was just. And I'm saying that putting my political opinions of Margaret Thatcher
It's
aside, it
very
was just a really
dull.
terribly made film
Yeah.
on every level except for the performance. I mean, why I don't get as much pleasure out of the like you were just saying like scenery chewing or a movie that only works because of the performance. Her performance is so good in this, and again, deservingly of the Oscar too. I felt for what she's able to do in this, that it kept my interest because of Meryl. Honestly, it was just
Yeah.
if anyone else had been in that, the performance wouldn't have been good, and this would have basically been a made-for-TV movie, which
Oh yeah.
everything else was operating on that level.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
felt at least.
I couldn't agree more with that. And it's sort of a wasted opportunity because I actually think from like a story structure and what they're trying to do, I like sort of this take on it. Like
Oh, you
as opposed
do?
to showing like a cradle to grave
Oh.
structure of the story, like somebody who's, in the end of their life and they're thinking about their life, and that's how, and we get to kind of see present and past collide.
Hmm.
I think it's an interesting take on it. Now, it's not done well,
Hmm.
and from a filmmaking standpoint and such, and it sort of ends up just being dull and stodgy, and the movie just doesn't ever breathe, just so dark. And like you said, it has a very TV movie kind of vibe to it. But I do like what they were trying to achieve from like a story structure standpoint. Because, she's such a controversial figure that
Hmm.
if you make a bird's eye view movie on Margaret Thatcher, there's no point doing that. There are a million documentaries. Go watch that. As opposed to what they tried to do, I think, is that you're seeing her, Margaret Thatcher, from
Hmm.
her own eyes, which I think is kind of interesting. Now, again, it's not done well and it sort
Right.
of loses that thread across the movie. So, but yeah, her performance is amazing, obviously. I think the makeup, which also won the Oscar, is also pretty amazing. Like I know the opening scene where she's the old lady and buying milk at the
Hmm.
grocery at the little bodega. It's her. I'm still always stunned by the fact that it's her because this
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just done so well that the makeup and the body language, like all of it. I also feel a little bit guilty and bad that this movie has kind of started the trend of actor and makeup wins, or I should say
Oh.
actress and makeup wins. There
Hmm.
have been many of those, and I'm not a big fan of that. That, oh, the movie is not great, and these are the only two nominations. I'm thinking Jessica Chastain. I'm thinking The Whale, which I have not watched, so I probably shouldn't comment on it. But it's they carry to the finish line, the makeup
Hmm.
and the performance.
Hmm.
I'm not the biggest fan of that trend. That said, for me, this is like a career Oscar for Meryl because she'd been nominated. I mean, the last one that she won before this was in the 80s,
True.
and she had like 20 nominations or however many between
Between,
that
yeah.
one. So
Hmm.
they were like, okay, fine, here it is. We give you
Hmm.
one. So it's sort of more of that. I'm still glad she has it, a third one,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, for sure. Me
I
too.
wish she had it for something else and not this, to be very honest. That said, the scenery chewingness of it, and there's so many lines, just the way she delivers it, that are kind of embedded in my mind. Because I also a timing thing, because this is sort of when, and listeners will hear this in the Meryl episodes, 2009 and 10 is when I was really diving into her career
Mm. Mm.
in like a big, big way. So I think it hit me at the right point.
Yeah, no, yeah, like right at that time. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I feel like she could have another one in her, honestly. She could
I
get
hope
another one
so.
potentially. But yeah, for me, I think the biggest surprise actually in this film, and again, as someone who abhors Margaret Thatcher and her politics, was it really actually didn't delve much into the politics in a weird way. Like they had very high level, oh, her dad made this one speech, and that's why she, doesn't believe in welfare. But it like she is such a political figure, and all these decisions she made were so rooted in her political identity. And I
Yeah,
almost felt like they were trying to remove that and say, you know what, let's not
yeah,
talk about the politics. Let's talk about her as a person. But I actually don't think you can separate those two. Like
yeah.
another politician I really don't like, Richard Nixon. There's a fantastic Oliver Stone movie on him, which is actually a lot of similar structure. He's flashing back to his life,
Mm,
but it shows you a lot of him and why he did things, and politics are
right.
in, I mean, as
You
Oliver
don't
Stone
see that here
puts
at all.
politics and everything. But here they almost try to like sidestep that. And I'm like, that's
Yeah,
actually the more interesting thing. I would have
right.
loved to see Meryl play Margaret Thatcher in a movie that is to the caliber of like Oliver Stone's Nixon or something, where
Yeah.
they're really delving into this person instead of trying to create sort of like more watered down. Oh, let's focus it on, her being this woman in a man's world, which, yeah, that's an interesting angle,
That's a
even
big
though
part of it, but that's not
it
the
is.
only part.
Right. It's not the only
And
part. I
then
thought that
also
was
sort
really
of,
odd.
missing out on life and the children and all
Yeah.
of that. Like,
Yeah.
I think those things are all interesting, but I totally agree with you. Like, Margaret Thatcher is rooted in her politics.
Yeah.
Show that,
Right. That's what we want.
Yeah,
Even as someone who doesn't like her, I would be very fascinated to
exactly.
delve more into those angles. Or like you said with the kids, there was hints of that. Like, wow, she really was just a terrible mother to these children.
Yeah.
Horrible mother. But why? Let's get into why, not just show it. Was it her politics she felt was more important, or that she was doing something for the
I
greater
got
good?
that
So
sense though,
a
that
little bit through Meryl.
it
I
was
think Meryl
that,
carried that through, but
yeah.
I would have wanted more in what the script delivered, which I think was the biggest failing of the film. Like it
Yeah,
just
the
was.
script is
But I
not
like
good.
the framing, like you said. I think the
Yeah,
framing was nice,
framing
but
is good.
the execution was just
No.
a lot to be desired. I was actually, I guess, really not surprised it was so bad because I'd heard so many bad things about it at the time. And, again, I think Meryl does a fantastic job. So obviously I'm like, okay, I get why she also won the Oscar. But yeah, not a movie I would recommend unless for a
No.
Meryl completist or someone like you who's like a huge fan of Meryl. Yeah, you got to watch it because she does just an incredible transformative, as she always does, job. And she really nails the accent and the gait, and Margaret Thatcher had a very specific way of talking. And you close your eyes and you're thinking you're hearing Margaret Thatcher, not
Yeah.
Meryl Streep. And I think actually, yeah, Margaret Thatcher was alive at the time of this,
Oh
I
yeah.
believe, too, which is also pretty brave to do a performance like this for a historical figure who's still around
So well known
and well
also.
known, but like she's still alive. I know there's just
Yeah.
something about that of like
It's pretty brave in
it's
that
brave,
sense.
and she does, a good job. Again, in
Yeah.
capturing what Margaret Thatcher was. I just wish the script was more interesting. That's all.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's a missed opportunity in that sense. But some of the scenes, like when she's totally losing it, I love those scenes in the boardrooms or conference rooms where she's giving shit to her team, and she's
Hmm.
like, everybody has some of us have not worked today or whatever. I forget the exact line, but I love those scenes where she's like totally losing it. All right, so what is your number one, Alex?
So my number one guilty pleasure movie is, and let me see if I can get the inflection on this title correct, A Talking Cat from 2013. This is directed by David DeCote, starring Jodie Whittaker, Kristen Bell, and the legendary Eric Roberts in probably his best performance. The plot summary: a sassy feline helps a family resolve its problems. Yeah,
Oh.
there it is. That's what this was about. So this movie, which
Quite scanty, just like the
yeah,
movie.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. This movie, because folks probably haven't heard of it, or maybe you have, is a very famously absolutely terrible film. So I'll talk a little. I actually started to talk about this a bit in our episode last week on group watching, where we covered The Room, another famously bad film,
Hmm.
where I touched on my love of bad movies. I'll expand on that a little bit here, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on this cinematic masterpiece. So I do, different from you, Karan, do really enjoy a certain type of really terrible film, and actually
Hmm.
probably can trace it back to a TV show that I was obsessed with as a high school student and then in college, called Mystery Science Theater 3000. This is a cable show where they took very, very terrible movies from like the 50s and 60s. And you would basically watch the movie as part of the show. So the episodes were like 2.5 hours. But in front of the screen, there'd be a little vignette of movie theater seats with a guy and two robots sitting there. And basically, they're making fun of the movie during the movie. So you're watching the film, but they're also making wisecracks and commenting on the film as the film plays. And I was obsessed with this. So as part of that show, I watched some of the worst movies that have ever been made in the context of being funny, like making fun of them, getting enjoyment out of this. So
Hmm.
because this is one of my favorite shows growing up, I think that is now why I have so many movies that are guilty pleasures
Mm.
of mine that are just absolutely wretched films. Again, like The Room, and A Talking Cat is another one of those, and just the perfect exemplification of this entire genre of guilty pleasure that I have. And I know you don't share this guilty pleasure,
No,
so I'm very curious on your
but I'm
thoughts on this.
enjoying your inflection. Are you going to do this the whole time?
It's called A Talking Cat. For
Oh my
folks who haven't
gosh.
looked at the episode summary, it's the name or the title's A Talking Cat, exclamation point, question mark,
Question mark.
exclamation point. So I just want to make sure, yes, I am going to do that the whole time. I owe the
I love
film
it.
that, right? That they did that on purpose for a very specific reason. I want to, respect the artist's intent, but love to hear, yeah, what was your experience? Which again, I want to apologize ahead of time for making you watch this.
I think your performance of the title of the movies already exceeded what the movie is. So I think that does it. I think
that's
it's a
that.
wrap. We're done.
That's
Uh,
those are your
that's
thoughts of the
that's
film
it.
right
Those are my
there.
thoughts. No, I mean, the moment I saw the movie started, I was like, oh, I know exactly why Alex loves this. Like, this is just complete. I mean, this is basically a home video,
Yes.
borderline bad porn movie.
Yes.
That's what this movie is. I
Yes.
kept waiting that, like, even the guy who plays the son of the main man,
The
the
dad.
older, the
Yeah.
dad, I was
Yeah.
like,
The millionaire,
this
whatever.
kid is from a porno, essentially.
He,
I mean, just look at him.
yeah.
He's a
Actually,
twink waiting, you
yeah.
know?
The director actually has made a lot of sort of softcore gay porn,
Okay,
which,
that
and I
makes a
wouldn't be
lot of
surprised,
sense.
not that I've seen those films, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were also filmed in this house. Looks like a house
Probably.
right out of a porn set. Like everything
Definitely.
about this screams cheap
Yeah,
porn to me.
absolutely. But I mean, I guess I get it. I mean, I'm not stupid, so I get it why when something is just so bad and so senseless, it's obviously hilarious. And this movie, even more so than The Room, like
Hmm.
the jump cuts and just the plot and oh, this is happening now, or why? Oh, this is happening now. Like th- it's mind numbing, but it's also very funny in that sense. Would I ever watch this again? Hell no. But did I have, at least it's not like, a million hours long. So
No, no, no.
I couldn't handle that.
It is
But
very short.
it's
Yeah.
very short for the duration of the movie. And look, unlike The Room, where you can see Tommy Wiseau's like passion come through,
Hmm.
even though it's done very well. I don't know what comes through in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of passion, so I referenced Eric Roberts is in this. He actually is the voice of the
Yeah, Julia
title
Roberts'
character.
brother.
Yeah, Talking Cat, who's an actor actually I really like. He was in The Dark Knight. He's done some great performances, so he can act. But in this film, his dialogue, which actually I found this out later after watching this for the first time, was recorded over the course of 20 minutes in an airport bathroom before he got onto a flight. And
That makes so much
if
sense.
I mean, literally, the opening line is something like, "Hey guys, my name's Duffy. I'm a talking cat." Like you can tell and you can hear the echo of the bathroom in his dialogue. It's just so you care. He doesn't care. So it is the exact opposite of Tommy Wiseau, who even though he's making a terrible movie, he's putting his heart and soul
Right.
into it. Eric Roberts is basically just like eating his airport subway in the middle of these takes to jump on a flight to go somewhere else. He's just literally doing this for the paycheck. But to me, that is actually what makes this so amazing, and why when I first started this movie, which I came across with my old roommate of mine who also was big fan of Mystery Science Theater, and we both loved watching bad movies, both of us. We came across this on Netflix. It's like, what is this? This looks so weird and cheap. And the second that Eric Roberts starts that dialogue, oh my god, we are in for some very special film here. Like this is insane. And like you said, it makes no sense. The
Makes no
plot
sense.
is all over the place. It's supposed to, again, be like a cat helping bring these two families together, but you don't really understand what the problems are. The dialogue is just insanely bad. There's this whole scene where the daughter of another family wants to go to business college.
Oh
Very
my
generic
gosh. I
business
get
college.
business
I want to go
college.
to
Yeah.
business college. You can't go to business college. Why do you always keep talking about business college all the time? You're making mom upset, the brother would be saying. And it's like written by Chat GPT or something. Actually, Chat GPT would probably do a better job
Oh, for sure.
on the
Yeah.
script than this. But that's what makes this so yeah, so bad it's good to me. I mean, you can even see the cat. There's scenes where you can see a laser pointer where they're trying to focus the cat's eyes. There's
Yes.
scenes where the cat's sitting there, just a bunch of like cat food in front of the cat, which clearly the filmmakers put there to make the cat stay or something. It's like no effort was put into this. And
No
that
effort.
to me is what makes it so enjoyable. I mean, I laugh at this every time I see it, but I love bad movies. I get enjoyment of terrible, terrible things to a certain extent. I mean, like I mentioned this on The Room as well. There are movies that are intentionally made bad, like a Cocaine Bear or Snakes on a Plane, which was another example of this. And I find that is like a sort of a cheap, cynical kind of cash grab to try to create like a memeified movie where you see Snakes on a Plane, which I did see opening weekend because it got all this hype back in 2004 or 5, whenever it came out, because the title was so outrageous. They cut together this crazy trailer with Samuel L. Jackson saying, "Get these goddamn snakes off the, MF and
Right.
plane." And everyone's like, "Oh, cool, let's go see it." And then within 5 minutes, you're like, this movie just bad, but not in an enjoyable way, like Talking Cat. It's supposed to be, but then they're trying to make it bad, and that doesn't work. Whereas this movie, I mean, they're not putting any effort into it. Not
No.
like Tommy Wiseau, they're not thinking this is Citizen Kane. This is literally just a cash grab, but it's that cynical lack of effort to me. I don't know. I love it. I love this
Yeah.
movie.
There's no effort whatsoever in this
Yeah.
movie. Yeah, Business College was pretty funny actually. Yeah.
No, that scene is there's some great, really bad dialogue, and her invention at the end of the movie ends up being this. It was kind of like in Clueless, where Cher has that software that helps create the perfect outfit.
Right.
But her invention, the production uses a book light like you would use, to at night to read your book, and it's supposedly like scanning clothes. They wave this book light on these clothes, and there's this really bad sort of sound effects that they use, like scanning clothes or whatever. And then that kid is putting on these outfits, and it's just like, what is going on here? Like, again, no effort at all. Like some of these scenes, you're like, they need another take, but they're like, you know what, just move
It's
on.
fine.
And you mentioned the length as well. Another funny thing that I now, having watched so many bad movies, you can tell when they're doing this, but this movie is padded with so much establishing shots for no reason. Like if they're cutting back to the house, there's like a 45-second shot of just like the house, and here's a beach, and because they want to pad the running time out so it's more than an hour. just so
Right.
it qualifies as a real movie.
I guess my question is why make it? Like if there's
Money.
no passion, but are you going to make money off this?
So there is a whole industry of like very, very cheaply made children's films. Maybe if it wasn't obvious enough to the listeners, this is meant to be a kids movie. So,
Oh,
parents
really?
have, yeah, parents have very, low quality bar when it comes to some parents. Like, hey, just put the kids something on the TV screen to like shut them up, have them watch the TV. So there's industries like making a ton of very, very cheap kids
Mm.
movies. And actually, this company who made this, I haven't seen any of their other films, but there's like a talking pony and an Easter dog. And like they just churn these things out. They probably
I
film
mean,
them all on the
admit
same
it,
day.
Alex, you have the entire library from the
Okay, you caught
studio.
me.
Okay,
you,
right.
you caught me. Yeah, they have a streaming service. I subscribe to that.
Right. You're the only one on the mailing
I am.
list.
I'm the only one on the mailing list, but they keep making the movies for me. But honestly,
And
there's
it's
sort of a
hard copy mail, by the way. It's not
yes, right.
e-hand. Yeah.
Yeah, they mail it to me. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
every month. But there is an industry in this, making as many cheap family movies, package them all together. Hey, Netflix will sell you, 40 of these movies. Because again, I discovered this on
Mm.
Netflix just randomly. Going through like a carousel on Netflix. It is sort of a cult hit now too. And there's a lot of even the guys who used to be at Mystery Science Theater, they have a podcast now where they make fun of movies still, and they covered
Mm.
this at one point. So
Mm.
there is sort of it's a famous bad movie, not to the extent of The Room. I don't think
Right.
it's screened anywhere, but
No.
it screens a lot in my living room. I'll tell you that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I enjoy Duffy's magical journey, and I should mention too. He's a talking cat, but he can only talk once to every person. He only has one scene he can share. That's part of this lore that they kind of like. Oh, there's a collar that makes a magic thing, and like you don't really understand what this plot is supposed to be about. But it's like he only talks once to one person. It's like this is your advice you're trying to give to these people. You're just magic talking cat. It's
Overly complicated.
yeah, it's so exactly so needlessly complicated for no reason. But yeah, if you love bad movies and haven't seen this yet, I highly recommend checking it out. And if you don't like bad movies, don't watch this because it is a
No.
terrible film, and you will gouge your eyes out. Like I'm sure, Karan, you were wishing this was not for the podcast, so you would have to turn you would have turned this off before the opening credits even finished. I bet.
No. I wasn't bored at least. I mean,
Okay.
admittedly, I might have fast forwarded some parts of it, but
Yeah. You didn't miss anything.
yeah, exactly. No, I noted. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on from a talking cat, what is your number one movie that shaped your guilty pleasure? And is there a special way you have to pronounce the title of this movie?
Uh, I'm afraid not, but
Oh,
hopefully I can at least, redeem us in some way after
yeah,
that.
you're right. Yeah, we probably lost so
Just a
many
tad,
listeners.
a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah. So my number one movie that shaped our guilty pleasures is Music and Lyrics from 2007, starring Hugh Grant, Drew Barrymore. Quick logline: a washed-up singer is given a couple days to compose a chart-topping hit for an aspiring teen sensation. Though he's never written a decent lyric in his life, he sparks with an offbeat younger woman with a flair for words. That's exactly what the movie is. And although I don't know what the age difference between those two is, I wouldn't. It's written in the IMDb logline as if Drew Barrymore's character is like much younger to Hugh Grant, but they sort of feel contemporaries to me.
I think they're within probably 8 years or something,
Yeah,
8 to 10 years, which is not weird.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
don't know that. I'm just assuming.
yeah. They at least look fine.
Yeah. I think so too.
So yeah, this movie's on my list and my number one because I think my love for cheesy rom-coms from late 90s and 2000s, especially more so 2000s, is
Hmm.
definitely up there. These movies are not often they're not very good and
Hmm.
they're kind of cheesy, but they solely win and work on the charm of its stars, and
Hmm.
they're made for them basically. And they are, cute moments, like they're set pieces the way you have in action movies. The set pieces of these movies are the meet cutes
Yep.
and the melodrama and the breakup in the
Right.
middle of the movie, and then a
Right.
soaring kind of winning moment at the very end. And I live for those, I'm here for all of those. And back in the day, they spent money making these movies, so they
Hmm.
look good and they have
Hmm.
great stars and such, and they're quite fun and enjoyable. Even though if you think, deeply, even a second, the whole thing falls apart because a lot of it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I love these. So, but yeah, had you watched this movie before?
No, I haven't. So it's
Oh
another
wow,
hat trick
3 for
episode.
3.
Three new movies that I had not seen. Yeah, for me, I share a similar love of I'll just say the like bad cheesy romantic comedies. Though I prefer them like one level under this where they don't have
Yeah,
high powered
I
stars.
can't
Like
go there.
I love the Lifetime version of this movie. I'd probably
Yeah.
enjoy it a lot more. And I'm not actually a big. I've turned around a lot on Hugh Grant in the last couple years, but I was very much against him in the '90s. He was very irritating to me, and I've never been really that into Drew Barrymore. I have to say though, the beginning of the movie started off very strong. Like I loved
Hmm.
the fake '80s band that Hugh Grant was
Hmm.
in. Like that had me laughing. I was really interested. And then once the romance sort of started going, I was okay. I'm a little bit invested. And then the movie sort of just turns into them writing the song together, and like the romance kind of like falls away. I was kind of bored in the end, but it was
Hmm.
harmless. You know, a harmless romantic comedy. Which again, if they just put this on Lifetime and recast it with like some a TV actor from Seventh Heaven or something, I think I just would have enjoyed it more. I don't know what that's sort of my more flavor. This I know you like more of the put the big stars, the Julias and the
Yeah.
Cameron Diaz's and what have you in it. But no, it was a harmless little like romantic film, and the performance is great. I thought there were chemistry there between the
Yeah.
two of them. I just sort of got bored as the movie became more interested in the song that they were writing than kind of them being together. But
Mm,
it was
mm,
I can see why this is your guilty pleasure for sure.
yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is totally a Quran guilty pleasure movie, definitely.
Yeah, I kind of love that, like I can't think of that many movies that actually show the process of writing music
Yes,
and
yeah,
making
yeah.
music that well. Because, it's not a very cinematic thing. Like, this is not somebody, making a painting or, creating a play or something. Like, this is
Right, right, right.
people sitting, talking to each other and writing lyrics. And I thought that was actually done pretty well. And the two of them actually sing for real in the movie. And he's actually quite good in his
Oh, they
singing,
do.
which,
They do
oh
sing.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a song. I used to
oh.
listen to that song, Love Autopsy.
You did?
I did on I had it on my iPod.
Oh my God, that is so funny. That's the guilty pleasure right there too,
That is a
then.
guilty pleasure right there. I know I'm kind of revealing way too much about myself on this, but I thought that was pretty well done. And then, it's not the most, highbrow critique,
No.
but it still is a critique on the music industry,
Yes.
like
Yeah, yeah.
the cash grabbiness of that and how these pop stars work and their entourage and, they want their things. And then Haley Bennett, who plays the teen pop sensation, and she's like, I want sticky and steamy. And,
Yeah, I liked that.
and
Yeah.
then they're jerry rigging this like romantic ballad into her whole thing. Like, I thought all that was very cleverly done. And then, what's a rom-com without a good meet cute? And I think their meet cute of the oddest
Okay.
job. I mean, it's
Yeah, sorry, I
totally
won't cut you off.
silly that she shows up to his apartment to water the plants. Like, I can't imagine this being a thing. And then she's just like humming some, lyrics, and that's how they meet, and that's how she catches his eye, and suddenly they're writing a song together. Like I said, do not question the logic of the things that happen, but I still think it's quite adorable.
Yeah, that Me Cute was one of the most, I guess, just from like the writer standpoint, like the laziest thing I have
Yeah.
ever seen. It's like, we're just gonna like make her water plants, which you're right. Like, what kind of job is that? She's just in the room and they're like, oh, wait a second, can you do this thing? Oh, now you're like my songwriting like partner. I'm like, what? Wait,
It's
what?
pretty low
And it's just
bar.
like, but again, it's a cheesy movie, so you kind of that some comment comes par and parcel. But I just prefer the like some sort of like tripping over a thing or getting into the cab. I'm like, you couldn't
Uh,
think of something a little more clever than just stick her in the corner watering a plant. I literally thought that actually was very funny to me that was what they came up with.
it's
I'm like,
quite
it's like
lazy.
what? But it has got a charm to it too. Again, like I was just defending a talking cat in terms of my enjoyment over it. So yeah, this is like so cheeseball. It's like okay, like
Yeah.
I honestly laughed at that. I was like, this is the freaking meet cute. This is so funny. This is what they came up with.
Yeah, Alex, I think you lost all cred at
I
this point.
did.
So
No, I
I
think I
think,
did. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
over.
this is the last episode now. We should stop doing this. I ruined the credibility
Uh,
of this show.
I'm hiring the talking cat as my next co-host. Yeah, this podcast has gone totally downhill because we lost our minds.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I'm a fan of these two and in this movie, and it's cheesy and silly, but it's pretty heartwarming, I think. And you're right, like the whole 80s thing and the scene of, these sort of washed up pop stars,
That was very funny.
playing to the older crowd and all
Yes.
these older women like throwing themselves. And I think that felt very true to me, the way it's handled. Like I would watch just a movie on that
Right. No,
and see
totally.
what happens.
Yeah, and maybe at some point we'll talk more about Hugh Grant, but I think this is also suits him very well too because
Yeah,
he can play sort of irritated and
very
annoyed.
well.
And that is what I'm sure pop stars that are like this, where they were big at one point and now they're basically playing to these crowds, but there's an arrogance in it too. Like they want the attention from somebody. And okay, it might as well be 45-year-olds. I mean, they
Right.
wish they were still at the top of the charts and doing, more quote unquote like legitimate stuff instead of singing the same song to, in like the back of the YMCA or whatever. But he's very well cast in this part for sure.
Yeah. And like you said, we'll chat more about Hugh Grant at some point in one of our actor series
Hmm.
episodes. So a quick teaser there. But this is his secret gift. Like he can be annoying and irritating and irritated at the same time, be charming, at the same time, be self-deprecating, at the same time, wants it. And there's like an effortlessness to it. Like not many people can do that. And he makes it
Hmm.
look very easy. Of course, like this movie is nothing without him. And she's very good too, but
She's
I
good
think
too, but
he
it's more
is
him.
the centerpiece, I think,
Hmm.
of the movie.
I totally agree. Yeah, and I was trying to think like of another actor whose persona would work in this part, especially in like the romantic comedy setting. And I think he's the only one I can think of.
Yeah.
Whereas, again, Drew does her typical like quirky,
Yeah.
odd girl performance thing, but not that I'm necessarily slagging her off too much, but there's a lot of actresses who can do that type of
Yeah.
role. But for the Hugh Grant part, I don't think there really, was. And again, the movie didn't really work for me overall, but I think it would have been a lot worse if it was not Hugh Grant in
Right.
that male lead. Like I don't think anyone else could have made it as enjoyable
Yeah.
as it was. Yeah, definitely not surprised that a romantic comedy from the 2000s was on this list for you.
Love autopsy, baby.
There we go. So, speaking of the list, what were some of the movies that did not make it for you that almost did?
Yeah, so I had a bunch of rom-coms from this time. So like she's just not that into you, Going the Distance, another Drew Barrymore
Oh
movie,
man.
Something Borrowed, Because I
Oh
Said
my. Oh
So.
my God.
He's the man. These are all
Oh.
27 Dresses. These are
Oh
all bad
man.
movies, which,
Yes.
I have enjoyed. Also, they used to be rerunning on cable a lot. So long time
Ah,
ago when I had cable, like this was
yeah.
sort of passive, background movie noise while
Hmm.
dinner or what have you. And there are good moments here and there. And
Yeah.
then for scenery chewing, another Merrill movie, August Osage County, which is also very dull and boring, but a lot of scenery chewing acting. So I
Hmm.
enjoy that. What about
Nice.
you?
Yeah, for me, I had a couple other stupid comedies: Kung Pao, Enter the Fist, Love Stinks, and Night at the Roxbury. I also have a couple other movies that are those so bad it's good films that if folks are into that type of thing, highly recommend. We already talked about The Room. I also highly recommend Miami Connection and Mac and Me. Just insanely bad films that
I
Cron. I
don't
will
know
not be
where
recommending
you're
those.
pulling out these
I
titles.
will not be recommending them to you. So I don't think you should probably
No.
avoid those films. But those are perennial like bad movie watching in my living room. So next week, Karan, we just talked about Iron Lady. Who are we discussing then next week? As someone who's definitely not a guilty pleasure at all, and just simply a pleasure to watch. What's the episode we got for the actor next week?
Yeah, just an upcoming starlet called Mariel Streep, is it? Mariel?
I don't know. I've never heard of her. Yeah, I
Never
was
heard of her.
introducing a new star to the
Right,
listeners then.
exactly. It's Meryl Streep, guys.
Yeah, get ready. And then after the Meryl episode coming back, what is the next topic we'll be tackling, Karan? In two
Yeah,
weeks.
so we'll be leaving our homes and especially your, guilty pleasure den to step out in the outdoors. So our episode is movies that shaped our view of the outdoors.
Yeah, get out. It's still the summer. Get out of the house a little bit. Maybe get ready to listen to this episode on a hike or at the beach or somewhere outside.
That
Maybe we
sounds
should record
fantastic.
this outside, that episode. Yeah, we'll go outside and get a nice sound of nature as we're recording our thoughts on those films.
And who knows, there might be a talking cat that passes by.
That's right. Yeah. Hello, I'm a talking cat.
Oh gosh. Well, we really hope you enjoyed this episode and this cheeseball lose your mind discussion about bad movies. We're very curious of what do you all enjoy as guilty pleasures? Are you more in my camp or Alex's camp? But as always, we are available on all the different podcast platforms, including YouTube. So please subscribe us and like us or leave a review on any of these platforms. It really helps us get discovered. Till next time, see you soon, Alex.
See ya.
Dennis!